Commander Alan Wright watched the giant screen with narrowed eyes. The alien ships looked like black thorns against the darkness of space. They had appeared 3 days ago at the edge of the solar system. No warning, no greeting, just their presence, and then a message: surrender or die. They sure don't waste time with pleasantries, Alan said, his voice low and steady despite the tension in the room. The command center of Earth Defense Station Alpha was filled with the soft beeping of computers and the whispers of worried staff. Outside, beyond the thick glass windows, Earth hung like a blue jewel in the blackness. Susan Miller stood beside Alan, her eyes fixed on the data flowing across her tablet. As communications officer, she had been the first to receive the alien message. "Commander, I'm seeing something odd in their broadcasts," she said. "The translation is perfect, too perfect, and there's a pattern to their messages that doesn't make sense." Alan turned to her. "Show me." Susan pulled up the files on the main screen. "See here and here? The way they structure their demands? It's like they're reading from a textbook on how to intimidate humans. And these pauses. They're waiting for responses on channels we haven't even told them about." A new voice joined the conversation. "They're working from old information." Dr. Gregory Peters walked into the command center, his normally neat appearance rumpled from lack of sleep. The xenobiologist had been studying the aliens since their arrival. "What do you mean, Doc?" Alan asked. Gregory pointed to his own tablet. "Their life support readings are all wrong. Their ships are burning through resources at an unsustainable rate. Whatever these creatures are, they're struggling just to exist in our solar system." Admiral Patricia Gomez, who had been listening, quietly finally spoke up. "That's interesting, but it doesn't change the fact that their weapons could turn Earth to dust. We can't risk billions of lives on a hunch that they might be weaker than they appear." Alan understood her concern. The alien fleet, the Krelvor, as they called themselves, had ships that made Earth's largest vessels look like toys. Their weapons were unknown but clearly powerful. "Admiral, I think we should look closer," Alan insisted. "Something isn't right here. They're acting like they have all the power, but they're making mistakes." Lieutenant Olivia Sanchez rushed into the room, her dark hair escaping from its tight bun. "Commander, Admiral, I've intercepted communications between their ships. Internal communications they didn't encrypt properly." Everyone turned to the young communications expert. "They're arguing among themselves," Olivia explained, excitement making her words come fast. "And they keep referring to someone, or something called the Watcher. Whatever it is, they're afraid of it." Alan looked at the Admiral. "This isn't a simple invasion. There's more happening here." Admiral Gomez frowned, deep in thought. The safety of Earth was her responsibility. If she made the wrong choice, humanity could pay the ultimate price. "What do you suggest, Commander?" she finally asked. "Let me take a small team to investigate. The Nightshade is designed for stealth. We can get close to their flagship, maybe even board it." "That's insane," Gregory said, but his eyes showed interest rather than fear. Susan nodded slowly. "If we could access their systems directly, I might be able to figure out what they're really saying to each other. If they catch you, it could trigger the very attack we're trying to avoid." "Admiral," Gomez warned. Alan stood straight, his decision made. "If I'm wrong, we lose one ship and a small crew. If I'm right, we might find their weakness and save Earth." The Admiral's face was grim as she considered the options. Finally, she gave a short nod. "Authorized. But this is a reconnaissance mission only. Gather information and get out, no heroics." 20 hours later, Alan stood in the hangar bay of the Nightshade with his small team. Susan, Gregory, and Chief Engineer Kyle Washington, a broad-shouldered man with hands that could fix anything mechanical. "Their shields have regular fluctuations," Kyle explained, showing them a complex diagram on his tablet. "We can slip through during this 5-second window." Gregory checked his equipment one last time. "My sensors should be able to gather biological data if we get close enough. I still can't believe we're actually going to board an alien ship." Susan loaded the translation software she had modified. "Just remember, their language is still mostly guesswork. Don't trust anything that sounds too convenient." Alan looked at his team. They were the best Earth had to offer. Brilliant, brave, and just crazy enough to follow him on this mission. We go in quiet, we find what we can, and we get out, he reminded them. Earth is counting on us. The Nightshade detached from the station and moved silently away from Earth. Its special hull absorbed radar and light, making it nearly invisible. As they approached the massive alien fleet, Alan felt a mix of fear and wonder. Humans had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer, but it wasn't the peaceful meeting they had hoped for. Or was it? Something about this whole situation felt wrong to Alan. The aliens were too theatrical, too obvious in their threats. It reminded him of an old nature documentary where small animals would puff themselves up to look bigger and more dangerous. Approaching the flagship, Kyle announced from the pilot's seat. Shield window opens in 30 seconds. Susan gripped her seat. If they detect us, they won't, Kyle assured her with more confidence than he probably felt. The Nightshade slipped through the opening in the shields like a needle through fabric. They were in, the first humans to come this close to an alien vessel. What they would find inside might determine the fate of their entire species. As Alan prepared the boarding equipment, he wondered if the Krelvor actually expected Earth to surrender without a fight. If so, they clearly didn't understand humans very well. Earth wouldn't surrender. But they might let the aliens believe they had the upper hand, while Alan and his team discovered what was really going on. The Nightshade hovered silently near the massive alien flagship. Alan and his team checked their gear one last time. Their suits were designed to protect them from unknown environments and keep them hidden from most detection systems. Remember, we're here to gather information only, Alan reminded them. No risks unless absolutely necessary. Kyle tapped at his control panel. I've found what looks like a maintenance entrance. The energy readings are lower there. The team moved through the vacuum of space, using small thrusters on their suits to guide them to the alien ship. Up close, the vessel was even more impressive. Its surface was covered with strange patterns that seemed to shift and move. Those aren't decorations, Gregory whispered over the comm system. There's some kind of living technology. Fascinating. They reached the maintenance entrance Kyle had identified. It took him less than 5 minutes to bypass the security systems. Either I'm a genius, Kyle said with a nervous smile, or they weren't expecting visitors. The door slid open, revealing a dark corridor. The team entered slowly, weapons ready. Inside, the gravity was slightly stronger than Earth's, making their movements feel heavy. Air is breathable, Gregory confirmed after checking his instruments. But there's something else in it. Some kind of spores, maybe. Keep your helmets on. They moved deeper into the ship. The corridors were tall and wide, clearly built for beings larger than humans. Strange lights pulsed along the walls, bathing everything in a pale blue glow. Susan stopped suddenly, pointing ahead. Movement. They pressed themselves against the wall as a figure approached. It was their first look at a Krelvor. The alien was tall, nearly 8 feet, encased in what looked like mechanical armor. It walked with a strange jerking motion as if the suit was doing most of the work. After the alien passed, Gregory checked his scanner. That's odd. The biological readings from inside that suit are tiny. Whatever's in there is much smaller than the suit suggests. They're making themselves look bigger, Alan said, just like we thought. The team continued until they found a room filled with screens and control panels. Kyle got to work immediately, connecting his devices to the alien technology. Their security is complex, but... There. I'm in, he said after several tense minutes, downloading their tactical database now. Susan moved to another console. I'm picking up their communications, internal messages between ships. Her eyes widened. Alan, they're terrified of us. What? Why would they be afraid? They're the ones with the big guns, Alan said. Not us specifically. Our atmosphere, our planet. Susan worked quickly to translate. More messages. Earth's air is toxic to them. They can't survive here without their suits, and even those aren't perfect protection. Gregory nodded. That explains the readings I got. Their life support systems are working overtime. They can't invade a planet they can't breathe on. Kyle looked up from his work. Their weapons are powerful, no doubt about that, but their shields have a major weakness. They can't handle certain electromagnetic frequencies. With the right equipment, we could punch right through them. Alan felt a surge of hope. This information could save Earth. But then Susan made an even more startling discovery. They're not acting alone, she said, her voice hushed. The Krelvor are working for something called the Collective. They're scouts, gathering information. So this isn't even an invasion? Alan asked. No, it's reconnaissance disguised as aggression, Susan explained. They're testing our defenses, our reactions. Everything we do is being recorded and analyzed. For what purpose? Gregory asked. For the real invasion, Susan said grimly. The Collective is coming. The Krelvor are just the advance team. Kyle suddenly tensed. Someone's coming. Multiple someones. They could hear the heavy footsteps of several Krelvor approaching the room. There was no time to finish downloading. All the data. We need to move, Alan said. Now. They rushed toward the exit, but they were too late. 3 Krelvor blocked their path, weapons raised. Unlike the one they had seen earlier, these were clearly soldiers. Run, Alan shouted. The team scattered, looking for cover. Weapons fire erupted in the room. Strange energy pulses tore through the air. Kyle cried out as one struck him in the leg, dropping him to the floor. Kyle! Alan turned back, but more Krelvor were pouring into the room. Go! Kyle shouted, pulling out his sidearm. I'll hold them off. Get that data back to Earth. Susan grabbed Alan's arm. We can't help him if we're all captured. Alan knew. She was right, but leaving a man behind went against everything he believed in. Still, the mission had to come first. Earth was counting on them. We'll come back for you, he promised Kyle, then turned to run. Gregory, Susan, and Alan fled through the corridors, pursued by aliens. They reached a junction where the path split 3 ways. Split up, Alan ordered. Better chance one of us makes it back to the ship. They separated, each taking a different path. Alan could hear the Krelvor close behind him. He rounded a corner and found himself face to face with one of the aliens. Its helmet looked different from the others, more elaborate. An officer, maybe, Alan. Raised his weapon, but the alien was faster. A pulse hit him in the shoulder, sending pain shooting down his arm. He staggered back, then turned and ran in the opposite direction. The ship was huge and maze-like. Alan soon realized he was lost. His suit's communication system was being jammed. He couldn't contact Susan or Gregory. Then, by pure luck, he found himself back at the maintenance entrance. And even better, he saw Susan hiding nearby. Gregory, he whispered. She shook her head. We got separated. I don't know if he made it. A moment later, they got their answer as Gregory came sprinting around a corner, 3 Krelvor in pursuit. Go, he shouted. I'll draw them off. Before Alan could protest, Gregory turned and fired at the ceiling. A panel collapsed, temporarily blocking the corridor. It wouldn't hold for long. Alan and Susan made it back to the Nightshade. The ship's engines hummed to life as they strapped in. We can't leave them, Alan said. We have to, Susan replied, her voice breaking. They sacrificed themselves so we could get this information back to Earth. As the Nightshade slipped away from the flagship, Alan made a silent promise to his friends. He would return, he would find them, and with the information they had gathered, he would make sure their sacrifice wasn't in vain. Earth now had a chance, against the Krelvor and against the Collective that would follow. The real battle was just beginning. The return journey to Earth was silent. Alan sat staring at the data they had collected, thinking about Kyle and Gregory. Susan focused on piloting the Nightshade, her eyes red from crying but her hands steady. We have to go back for them, Alan said for the 10th time. We will, Susan promised. But first we need to make sure this information gets to people who can use it. When they docked at Earth Defense Station Alpha, Admiral Gomez was waiting for them. Where are the others? She asked, noticing the missing team members. Captured, Alan said, his voice tight. But we got what we came for. They gathered in the station's secure meeting room. Along with Admiral Gomez, the room held the highest-ranking military officers and scientists available. Alan stood at the front, ignoring the pain in his shoulder where the alien weapon had hit him. The Krelvor aren't what they appear to be, he began. They're physically small beings using mechanical suits to make themselves look bigger and stronger. Earth's atmosphere is poisonous to them. They couldn't survive here without extensive protection. Susan stepped forward. More importantly, they're not working alone. They're scouts for a larger force called the Collective. This isn't an invasion, it's a test. They're studying us, our defenses, our responses. The room erupted in questions. Admiral Gomez raised her hand for silence. If what you're saying is true, we may have an advantage, she said. But we need more than just your word. Alan nodded to Susan, who connected her tablet to the main screen. Data from the alien ship filled the display. Their shields have a weakness, Alan continued. They can't handle certain electromagnetic frequencies. Kyle found a way to exploit this before he was captured. Dr. Natalie Reeves, Earth's leading weapons scientist, studied the data with intense interest. With this information, I could develop a broadcasting system that could penetrate their shields. That's not all, Susan added. I downloaded parts of their communication system. We could use it to feed them false information about Earth's defenses and technology. Admiral Gomez's expression was thoughtful. You're suggesting we pretend to surrender? Exactly, Alan said. We give them what they're asking for, but on our terms. While they think they've won, we prepare. Frank Delgado, an intelligence officer, with a perpetual frown, shook his head. This is incredibly risky. If they realize we're playing them, they might just decide to obliterate us from orbit. That's why we need to be convincing, Susan replied. Their society values dominance displays, above actual combat. If we appear properly submissive while secretly preparing, they'll lower their guard. What about the men you left behind? Admiral Gomez asked. Alan's jaw tightened. Any plan we make has to include rescuing Kyle and Gregory. They're still alive, I'm sure of it. For the next 2 days, they worked tirelessly on what they called Operation False Surrender. Dr. Reeves and her team developed weapons that could target the Krelvor's vulnerabilities. Susan worked with psychologists to craft a convincing surrender message. Their language is highly formal, she explained to the team. They expect specific phrases and responses. If we do this right, they'll believe we're giving up because we recognize their superiority. Lisa Chen, a young tactical officer with a brilliant mind, proposed an addition to the plan. What if we invite their leaders down for a formal ceremony? She suggested. We could control the environment, make it seem safe for them while secretly giving us an advantage. Alan liked the idea. It would give them access to the Krelvor leaders, and possibly provide an opportunity to rescue his friends. We'll need to make them think the air is safe for them, he said. Can we do that? Dr. Reeves nodded. We can adjust the atmosphere in a sealed room to match what they need. They'll think we're accommodating them out of respect, but we'll maintain control. Admiral Gomez officially approved Operation False Surrender. Earth's governments were briefed in secret. On the surface, the world began to prepare for alien rule. Underground, they prepared for resistance. 3 days later, Earth broadcast its surrender. The carefully worded message was designed to appeal to Krelvor sensibilities while revealing nothing of their true plans. The response came quickly. The alien commander accepted Earth's surrender and, as they had hoped, demanded a formal ceremony with Earth's leaders. The meeting would take place in New York in 1 week. It's working, Susan said as they listened to the message. They believe us. Alan wasn't celebrating yet. Now comes the hard part. We need to get back on that ship and find our people. Admiral Gomez approved a second mission to the alien flagship. This time, Alan and Susan would go with a new team. Security Officer Diane Powell, a woman with more combat experience than the rest of them combined, and pilot Joe Martinez, who had flown more stealth missions than anyone in the fleet, will lead by pose as diplomatic escorts, Alan explained as they prepared. The Krelvor will expect humans to come aboard to discuss the surrender terms. While we're there, we'll locate Kyle and Gregory and plant devices that will disrupt their fleet's coordination during the ceremony. Diane checked her weapons. They looked like standard diplomatic security gear, but had been modified with Dr. Reeves's new technology. And if we're discovered, she asked. Then we make sure the devices are planted before we're captured or killed, Alan said bluntly. The mission comes first, but I'm not planning on losing anyone else. The diplomatic shuttle launched the next day. It approached the Krelvor flagship openly, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Earth Diplomatic Vessel Harmony," Susan transmitted, requesting permission to board to discuss surrender terms. The aliens granted permission immediately. They were eager to complete their victory. As their shuttle docked, Alan fought to keep his expression neutral. Somewhere on this massive ship, his friends were being held prisoner, and if their plan failed, Earth itself would be next. The doors opened and they stepped onto the alien ship once again. "Be submissive," Susan reminded them in a whisper. "Eyes down. Remember, we're the defeated species now." A group of Krelvor in their imposing mechanical suits waited for them. The leader stepped forward. "Welcome, humans," it said through a translator. "Your wise decision to surrender will save many lives." Alan bowed his head, hating the gesture, but knowing it was necessary. "We are honored by your mercy," he said, the practiced words tasting bitter in his mouth. The real mission was just beginning, and this time, failure wasn't an option. The Krelvor led Alan and his team through the massive ship. Alan kept his eyes down, playing the part of a defeated human, but his mind was racing. He was memorizing every turn, every doorway, searching for signs of where Kyle and Gregory might be held. "The surrender terms are simple," the Krelvor leader said. Its voice came through the translator as flat and emotionless. "Earth will provide resources. Humans will not resist Krelvor authority. Selected humans will be studied." Susan nodded meekly. "We understand. Our leaders wish to discuss the details of the resource transfer." The alien seemed pleased by their submission. "You are learning quickly. The collective will be satisfied." At the mention of the collective, Alan and Susan exchanged a quick glance. Any information about the real threat could be useful. They were taken to a large meeting room. The walls were covered with screens showing images of Earth cities, military bases, and natural resources. "They've been watching us for a long time," Diane whispered, her hand never far from her concealed weapon. The Krelvor leader gestured to a table. "Sit. We will discuss the terms." As they sat down, Alan pressed a small button on his wrist. The device would scan for human life signs throughout the ship. It was their best hope of finding their missing friends. Susan began discussing the surrender terms, asking carefully crafted questions designed to keep the aliens talking while the scan worked. Diane and Joe placed themselves near the doors, looking nervous but actually securing their escape route. 20 minutes into the meeting, Alan's wrist device vibrated. It had found something. He glanced down at the small display. 2 human life signs deep in the ship's interior. Now they needed a way to get there. "Our leaders request a gesture of trust," Alan said suddenly. "Perhaps you could show us more of your impressive ship? It would help convince Earth's people of your power." The Krelvor leader considered this. "Your fear is satisfying. Yes, I will show you our might." The alien led them on a tour through the ship's main areas. They saw weapon systems that could destroy entire cities, engines that could move the massive vessel between stars, and communications arrays that kept them connected to the distant collective. All the while, Alan was guiding them closer to where the scan had detected humans. He asked questions about areas that would take them in the right direction, pretending to be impressed by everything he saw. Finally, they reached a section of the ship with unusually tight security. Guards stood at every door. "What is this area?" Susan asked innocently. "Research," the Krelvor leader replied. "Not for human eyes." Alan felt certain this was where they were keeping Kyle and Gregory, but how to get inside? The answer came in an unexpected way. An alarm suddenly blared throughout the ship. The Krelvor guards looked up in alarm. "What is happening?" their leader demanded through its communicator. The reply came in the alien language, but Alan could see it was serious. Most of the guards rushed away, leaving only 2 at the research area door. "A problem with the ship's systems," the leader explained. "Wait here." As soon as the leader was gone, Diane moved. With shocking speed, she disabled both guards before they could raise their weapons. Joe pulled out a device and attached it to the door control. 10 seconds, he said tensely. The door slid open. Inside was a laboratory filled with strange equipment, and there, strapped to examination tables, were Kyle and Gregory. Kyle's eyes widened when he saw them. "About time," he managed to say, his voice weak but his spirit intact. Gregory looked worse, pale and barely conscious. Alan and Joe quickly freed them while Susan and Diane stood guard. "They've been inside our heads," Kyle explained as Alan helped him stand. "They know about the false surrender." Alan's blood went cold. "How much do they know?" "Not everything," Kyle said. "I managed to hide some of it. But they know we're planning something. They're going to spring a trap at the ceremony. They needed to warn Earth. But first, they had to complete their mission and plant the disruption devices." "Can you walk?" Alan asked Gregory, who was now sitting up. "Do I have a choice?" Gregory replied with a weak smile. Susan looked at the lab equipment. "We should destroy this. They've gathered too much information about human biology." Diane was already placing small charges around the room. 2 minutes until this all goes up. Alan helped Gregory while Joe supported Kyle. They moved as quickly as possible back toward their shuttle, taking a different route to avoid the main corridors. "We still need to plant the devices," Alan reminded them. "Without them, the plan fails." Kyle reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. "Already did it. When they were probing my mind, I got access to their systems. I planted a virus in their network. It's set to activate during the ceremony." Alan stared at him in amazement. "You managed to do that while being tortured?" Kyle gave a pained grin. "They thought they were reading my mind. They didn't realize I was reading theirs." They reached the shuttle bay just as explosions rocked the ship. The lab was destroyed, along with all the data the Krelvor had gathered. "They're going to be very angry," Susan said as they boarded their shuttle. "Good," Alan replied. "Angry enemies make mistakes." As their shuttle pulled away from the flagship, the Krelvor sent no messages and fired no weapons. They were maintaining the pretense that Earth had surrendered. But now both sides knew the truth. This was a chess game, and the next move would happen at the surrender ceremony. Back on Earth, Alan reported directly to Admiral Gomez. "They know we're planning something, but they don't know exactly what. And they're still coming to the ceremony." "Why would they walk into what they know is a trap?" the Admiral asked. "Because they're confident they can turn it against us," Alan explained, "and because they're still gathering information for the collective. Every interaction with us is data they can use." Dr. Reeves joined them, along with President Maria Alvarez, a stern woman who had been leading Earth's response to the crisis. "The modified atmosphere in the United Nations building is ready," Dr. Reeves reported. "It will appear safe to their sensors, but it's designed to gradually weaken their exoskeletons." President Alvarez nodded. "Our security teams are in place, armed with the new weapons. All world leaders have been briefed. Everyone knows to play their part." The day of the ceremony arrived. 5 Krelvor ships descended to Earth, landing near the United Nations building in New York. News cameras broadcast the event worldwide, showing Earth's surrender to the powerful aliens. Inside the building, President Alvarez waited with other world leaders. They all wore expressions of defeat and resignation. But hidden throughout the building were security teams armed with Dr. Reeves's new weapons, designed to target the aliens' vulnerabilities. Alan stood near the president, now dressed as a formal security officer. Susan was nearby, ready to monitor the aliens' communications. Kyle and Gregory were safe in a medical facility, but they had provided crucial information that might save the planet. The Krelvor delegation entered the building. 5 tall figures in mechanical exoskeletons, moving with that strange jerking motion that revealed the true nature of the small beings inside. President Alvarez stepped forward, head bowed in apparent submission. "Welcome to Earth," she said. "We are prepared to formalize our surrender." The lead Krelvor responded, its translated voice filling the quiet room. "Your wisdom in accepting Krelvor dominance will be noted by the collective." And so the ceremony began. Earth offering itself to alien rulers who thought they had won. But the humans knew something the Krelvor didn't. This wasn't a surrender. It was a trap. The United Nations building was silent as President Alvarez finished reading the terms of Earth's surrender. The 5 Krelvor representatives stood tall in their mechanical suits, looking down at the human leaders with what seemed like satisfaction. "The terms are acceptable," the lead Krelvor said through its translator. "The collective will be pleased with your submission." President Alvarez bowed her head. "Before we sign the final documents, we have prepared a small gesture of respect." She looked up at the alien leader. "We have adjusted the air in this room to match your home atmosphere. Perhaps you would be more comfortable removing your helmets. For the formal signing?" The aliens hesitated. Their mechanical heads turned toward each other in what seemed like silent communication. "How did you know what atmosphere we require?" the lead Krelvor asked, suspicion in its mechanical voice. Alan, standing near the president, tensed. This was the critical moment. President Alvarez smiled. "We studied your ship's emissions. Our scientists determined what would be most comfortable for you. It is a sign of our willingness to accommodate our new governors." The flattery worked. The Krelvor, convinced of their superiority, believed the humans would go to such lengths to please them. Their leader reached up and with a soft hiss removed its helmet. The room saw the true face of the Krelvor for the first time. The alien was small with pale blue skin that seemed almost translucent. Its large eyes blinked in the light, and its thin mouth formed what might have been a smile. "Your gesture is noted," it said, its real voice high and whistling. The other 4 Krelvor followed their leader's example, removing their helmets. They seemed relieved to breathe without the bulky equipment. President Alvarez nodded slightly to Alan, who pressed a button on his wrist device. "Now," he whispered into his hidden microphone. Throughout the building, hidden technology activated. A faint hum filled the air. The Krelvor representatives suddenly stiffened, their expressions changing from confidence to confusion. "What is happening?" the leader demanded, its voice no longer powerful but thin and frightened. In orbit around Earth, Kyle's virus activated in the Krelvor systems. Their ships lost communications with their leaders and with each other. Earth's defense fleet, which had been seemingly defeated, suddenly revealed weapons and shields that had been hidden from alien scans. Back in the United Nations building, President Alvarez stood taller, all signs of submission gone from her posture. "Your exoskeletons are temporarily disabled," she explained calmly. "The atmosphere in this room is not what you think it is. We can adjust it at any moment to become toxic to your biology." The lead Krelvor tried to move its mechanical suit, but it responded sluggishly. "Trickery," it hissed. "Yes," President Alvarez agreed. "Exactly like the trickery you planned for us." Security teams moved in, surrounding the aliens. They carried weapons designed by Dr. Reeves, calibrated to the exact frequencies that would penetrate Krelvor shields and armor. "We know what you are," President Alvarez continued. "We know about the collective, and we know you were never planning to honor any surrender." "Impossible," the Krelvor leader said. "How could primitive humans understand our technology, our plans?" Admiral Gomez stepped forward. Until now, she had been standing quietly at the side of the room. "We've been monitoring your kind for longer than you realize," she said. "This isn't the first time the collective has sent scouts to our system." The Krelvor leader's large eyes widened. "No other scouts have returned to the collective. We assumed they had failed." Alan smiled. "They did fail, just as you have." On screens around the room, images appeared showing the Krelvor fleet, surrounded by Earth ships. The aliens' weapons were offline, their engines disabled, all thanks to Kyle's virus. The Krelvor leader had a name, they now learned. It was Zorkan, and the proud alien was now faced with complete defeat. "You lured us into a trap," Zorkan said. "Yes," President Alvarez replied, "just as you planned to lure us into one." The room was tense as humans and aliens faced each other. The balance of power completely reversed. "What will you do with us?" Zorkan asked, its thin voice shaking slightly. President Alvarez looked at Alan, who stepped forward. "That depends on you," Alan said. "We're offering you a choice." "A choice?" Zorkan seemed confused by the concept. "Alliance or expulsion," Alan explained. Work with us against the collective or leave our solar system and never return. The idea clearly shocked the aliens. Zorkon looked at its companions, who seemed equally stunned. Alliance? With lesser beings? The collective would destroy us all. Gregory, who had recovered enough to attend the ceremony, stepped forward from where he had been observing. The collective has dominated your people for ages, he said. We saw it in your ship's records. You serve them out of fear, not loyalty. Zorkon was silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice so quiet they could barely hear it, the alien spoke. We never believed resistance was possible. The collective has ruled for thousands of years. All species submit or perish. Kyle, using crutches but insistent on being present, moved to stand beside Alan. It doesn't have to be that way anymore, he said. Together, we have a chance. How? Zorkon asked. You are one planet. The collective spans galaxies. President Alvarez gestured to the screens showing the Krelvor fleet, now under human control. We took control of your ships in days, she pointed out. Imagine what we could accomplish as allies instead of enemies. The 5 Krelvor huddled together, speaking in their whistling language. The humans waited, weapons still ready in case this was another trick. Finally, Zorkon turned back to them. The collective will send more ships when we fail to report. They will send a true invasion force. We're counting on it, Admiral Gomez said with a cold smile. We'll be ready. And this time, Alan added, they won't be facing just humans. They'll be facing humans and Krelvor together. A strange sound came from Zorkon, something like laughter but higher pitched. You are not what we expected, the alien admitted. Perhaps that is what the collective fears. So? President Alvarez asked. What is your choice? Zorkon looked at its fellow aliens, then back at the humans. When it spoke, its voice was stronger than before. We choose alliance. The tension in the room eased slightly, though no one fully relaxed. Trust would take time to build. The collective has dominated our people for millennia, Zorkon explained. We never believed resistance was possible. Kyle smiled, leaning on his crutches. It's not just possible. Together, it's inevitable. In the weeks that followed, humans and Krelvor worked together to prepare for the true battle to come. The alien scouts shared everything they knew about the collective's weaknesses, while Earth shared its own unique approaches to warfare and technology. Earth's false surrender had become a real alliance. The planet revealed itself not as an easy conquest, but as the hidden resistance that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. 2 months later, Alan stood with Zorkon on the observation deck of Earth's largest space station. Together, they watched as the combined fleet of human and Krelvor ships prepared for the collective's arrival. Do you think we'll win? Zorkon asked. Alan smiled. They still believe they have the upper hand. That's exactly how we want it. For the first time in its long history, the collective was about to face an enemy it had never anticipated. Humans and their unlikely allies, united against a common foe. The real war was just beginning. But Earth was no longer alone, and the collective was no longer unchallenged. The stars had never seemed so full of possibility.